balance for him,
right,
because, you know, he's extraordinarily pro-life. He believes life begins at conception, would outlaw abortion altogether. He's against gay marriage. So these are issues that a lot of young voters would have trouble with. You mentioned that Chris Christie and Rand Paul had a little bit of a public spat over national security. I think we have some of that tape. Let's take a listen to that.
This strain of libertarianism that's going through both parties right now, and making big headlines, I think is a very dangerous thought. And as the governor now of a state that lost the second most people on 9/11 behind the state of New York, right, and still seeing those families, John, right, I love all these esoteric debates that people are getting in.
Senator Rand Paul, for example?
Well, listen, you can name any number of people who've engaged in it, and he's one of them. I mean, these esoteric, intellectual debates, I want them to come to New Jersey and sit across from the widows and the orphans and have that conversation.
Pretty tough talk, and there's Republican Party still a strong national defense party. Is there room for Rand Paul's brand of sort of isolationism?
Yeah, I think there's always been this strain. I think there's increasingly a number of people. Ironically, it's not so much the younger people, you know, like in their 20s. A lot of them, they've grown up with Facebook, they've grown up with cell phones. A lot of them seem to be much more comfortable with this than people maybe my age, in their late 30s, early 40s, or closer to his age, frankly. And those people in the Republican Party he's speaking to them. But to the older voters, to you know, sort of the bulk of Republicans, I think Chris Christie is sort of voicing a little bit of their concerns. Although also he and Rand Paul just sort of hate each other. So, you know, it's a little tough to deal with.
There's that too.
Yeah.
Governor, what do you make of that and where the Republican Party is today on national security?
None of your damn business. I like that. You know what? We shouldn't spy on our neighbors. I didn't support it with the Patriot Act and Real ID. The Republicans were wrong with George Bush. The Democrats were wrong who voted for it. And Rand Paul has this one right. I'm outraged that a Democratic president is allowing the NSA to spy on American citizens. It's okay to spy on foreigners, American citizens. That's our Constitution. But Rand Paul needs to add, none of your damn business in my doctor's office to that. Leave women alone. And none of your damn business who I marry and who I love. None of your damn business. So, Rand, if you want to come on over to us libertarians, you got to be consistent. You can't go halfway.
And he's going to have trouble, in a way, appealing to the young folks that he's courting right here without adopting some of those positions.
Well, yeah, I mean, look, it's not news. Rand Paul's a conservative, and he's going to have to try and do a broad appeal. But, you know, I think on issues like, you know, social issues, he's having a good, you know, states' rights sort of argument, which, you know, isn't perfect for a lot of liberals, but people might say, okay, well, as long as he's not going to, you know, be legislating from the Oval Office, then that's a different thing. I will say, though, it was interesting you described, you know, a sort of isolationist foreign policy. I actually don't think that Rand Paul has a isolationist foreign. I think, you know, non-intervention is different to isolationism. He wants to be engaged in the world, but he doesn't want our military being overly involved. I think, you know, isolationism taken to an extreme is something like North Korea, and non-interventionism taken to an extreme is something like Switzerland. Yeah, and you know, I was at CPAC recently, and this sort of, you know, John Bolton and all these other you know, Bush hangovers are talking a lot about isolationism, and I think it's important to you know, that's not really the foreign policy that he's advocating. It's actually a foreign policy that I think young people are sympathetic to.
Well, and Rand Paul, in a way, has not been quite as consistent in foreign policy as his dad was. I think he might draw some distinctions there. He criticized the president over not being strong enough, whatever that means. But, Emily, you work a lot with the young folks. And the Republican Party, it's no secret, they need to appeal to more young folks if they're going to have an electoral shot in the future. They have been making some new attempts. They're out with a new ad with a hipster young man, young millennial. Let's take a look at that.
I get ticked off at politicians who say they want to help the unemployed and then vote for regulations that make it impossible to hire anyone. Listen, you can't help the unemployed by hurting the people that could employ them. I'm a Republican because my friends need a paycheck, not an empty promise.
How's this going to play with the youngins?
Oh, he's so hip in his tortoiseshell glasses. He's so appealing. I mean, I think this is, you know, the closest thing is a good messenger the Republicans have found. Right. But consistently, the problem with the Republican Party reaching out to young people is they think the problem is messaging. They don't think the problem is the substance. Right. The real problem is the substance. Young people don't see anything coming out of the Republican Party, policies that can help them, policies that can help them build a future. I mean, you talk about Rand Paul going over there. The reason he went to Berkeley, basically, is because he wanted to say, oh, you entrepreneurs, I'm with you, I feel for you. You talk about tech, I get it, I'm there. But then talk about the realities they're going to face, like the fact that now these young people graduated, now they actually have the capability to start a business without worrying about health insurance, because they can buy it in the open market or stay on their parents' plans. Things he's against.
Well, and one of the things that the recent Pew Research poll revealed was that on a range of issues, whatever young millennials identified as, they tended to be much more liberal than older cohorts, and that's not likely to change anytime soon. All right, I want to thank John Stanton with BuzzFeed and Reason Magazine's Matthew Feeney for joining us today. An update on this morning's breaking news out of Michigan.